Hello, friend. Welcome to Foundations, a series by Chrysalis Arts Ministries in which we talk about the foundations of our lives, the storms that threaten them, and what we can do to help with the vital process of healthy, foundational personal development. My name is Stephen Brown. I am the founder of Chrysalis, and I will be your host today. I hope that this episode helps spark positive transformation for you in your life, and through you to those around you. Now let's get started. In our last episode, we talked about the importance of building healthy life foundations and the threat that external and internal storms and parasites pose to our foundations. In today's episode, I'm going to pull back the curtain to look at a problem that I would call the biggest threat to our attempts to build healthy foundations and structures in our lives. This is a really important concept to understand before we move any further forward in the process of building our foundations. For us at Chrysalis Arts Ministries, this is one of the key concepts we are working to address with our programming. So for today's word picture, I want you to picture yourself trapped on a hamster wheel. There's something you really want right in front of you, but no matter how hard you try or how fast you run, you just can't quite reach it. But you can't quite bring yourself to stop chasing it, no matter how tired and frustrated you get. You feel like you can't stop running or step off the wheel. You also don't know what you would do instead if you did get off, and that scares you too. Even worse, there are all kinds of people around you saying and doing things that make you feel like you can't stop, like you have to keep running. Many of them are running on hamster wheels too, but they seem to be going farther and faster than you, and you have to run faster to catch up. But the more you run, the more you realize none of you are actually getting anywhere. It sounds like something out of a nightmare, right? But this isn't a nightmare. It's a very real thing that happens to so many people. I call this phenomenon the hamster wheel. The hamster wheel isn't necessarily bad in and of itself. For some people, the hamster wheel provides a sense of stability and purpose and security in the midst of a turbulent world. But taken to its extreme, the hamster wheel becomes an all-consuming obsession that hurts the person caught in it and those around them. For fun, I like to refer to this as the giant flaming hamster wheel of death. But for the purposes of this podcast, I'll just call it the hamster wheel, and we'll try to remember that I'm referring to the bad version of it. The hamster wheel looks a little different in different settings. In a school setting, it might start out as the pursuit of good grades, and then it might become the pursuit of straight A's. Then maybe it becomes the desperate pursuit of getting into a great college, and not just any great college, but one of what you see as being the top 10 to 15 colleges in the country. But no matter how hard you try, the goalposts keep moving, and you never quite seem to be able to reach the goal and stop running on the hamster wheel. In a social setting, the hamster wheel could be the manufactured image of yourself that you present to the public in the pursuit of being liked and respected. This false perception of who you are becomes more and more all-consuming and harder to maintain as you try to hide the real you. You change the way you dress and act and eat and what you post on social media and so many other things to keep up appearances. But no matter how hard you try, you fear it may never be enough. The pressure of keeping up appearances weighs on you more and more and leaves you less and less fulfilled and free. Addictions are also a form of hamster wheel as they demand you feed them more and more. But no matter how much you feed them, it will never be enough. And even though you want to stop, you struggle to do so. There's a hamster wheel for just about everyone. We all have the ability to get off them, but so often we can't see anything but that haunting goal glinting just in front of us, just out of reach. And we fear what would happen if we stopped. So many people around us seem to be running faster, getting farther and farther ahead. We fear being left behind and disregarded. Yet if you look at many famous athletes and actors and singers and social media personalities and other seemingly successful people, they have reached the pinnacle of the hamster wheel pursuit, and yet so many of them still can't stop. They still aren't satisfied. They still aren't happy. So many of them are plagued by brokenness through addictions, broken relationships, and a total lack of healthy inner development and basic life skills. Those who do get off the hamster wheel, either by choice or by running out of room to run, often find themselves initially dazed and confused, unable to comprehend or adjust to life without it. The hamster wheel can be incredibly isolating and numbing, so stepping off can feel quite overwhelming at first. For those who have spent their whole lives on it, getting off can be extremely disorienting and can feel totally unstable and unsafe. There's a whole world outside of the hamster wheel, yet so many people pour their whole lives into that narrow little wheel that they simply cannot handle the thought of life without it. The hamster wheel is one of the main underlying causes behind the rising rates of low self esteem, image issues, unhealthy levels of competition and comparison, depression, despair, anxiety, addiction, and suicidal thoughts. It also contributes heavily to toxic social patterns of bullying and abuse, exclusion, discrimination, and so much more. There are tons of movies and series that and theater shows that illustrate this concept. One of the best stories that illustrates this concept is the movie You Can't Take It With You. This is a beautiful contrast of a life on the wheel versus a life free from it. It shows the contrasting stories of two households, two communities. The community of Anthony Kirby has become totally consumed with business and the pursuit of profit and success at all costs. It's a very hierarchical culture with a lot of judgment and walls dividing people. The walls are both physical in the closed off offices and also metaphorical in the way that the Kirby parents view and treat people. Mr. Kirby is very rich in money, but very poor in joy and love and empathy and relationships. As somebody puts it, when Mr. Kirby dies, there won't be a single person who shows up to his funeral to mourn his passing. What good will all his money be then? You can't take it with you. On the other side, we have the family of Mr. Vanderhoff. He used to live the hamster wheel life too, but one day he realized how empty it all is, and so he walked out of his fancy corporate job and never went back. Now he does whatever he wants to, whatever brings him joy. He has a house full of people who care nothing for money. Instead, they focus on doing what they love, pursuing the things that bring joy to them and those around them. There are very few walls in this household, again, both literally and metaphorically. The living room is simultaneously the dining room, the music room, and the writing studio. And there's an open chimney where fireworks whiz by on their way to the sky out of the basement workshop. The whole house is bursting with life. There's no judgment, just complete acceptance of the gifts and passions and personalities of the people that live there. The people are far from perfect, but they have learned to accept and adapt to each other's quirks and weaknesses. It's also not closed off and exclusive. It's an open community. One of the people that lives there used to be the guy delivering the ice, and he came to their house one day for a delivery and decided to stay. Now he builds fireworks and other things in the workshop. This household earns just enough to pay their bills, and they are happy and fulfilled and surrounded by family and friends who become like family. They may be considered poor in money, but they are rich in all the things that truly matter in life. This household is bursting with freedom, love, grace, and open hearts and minds. In many ways, You Can't Take It With You is the best movie ever made about what life often is like versus what it could be like. Interestingly, the stage version of this story has been one of the top 10 most produced school plays since 1939. Yet it seems like the core message hasn't quite sunk in, because throughout most of that period of time, our country has looked more like the Kirbys than the Vanderhoff household. There are other movies that illustrate this concept. The movie Mary Poppins is all about a wealthy family in London. The father, George Banks, is firmly stuck on the hamster wheel, completely consumed by his business life, and it's destroying him and his family. It's isolating him and numbing him to the emotional needs of those around him. He has lost his joy and the childhood traits of imagination, curiosity, and wonder. And there's a great risk of the same thing happening to his children. But then a magical nanny named Mary Poppins arrives and brings wonder and imagination and love and joy back into the Banks family. She helps them break free of the hamster wheel. The first season of Mighty Ducks Game Changers is a beautiful portrayal of the destructive impacts of the hamster wheel and how to break free from that cycle in youth activities. It tells the story of Evan, an average kid who gets cut from his pee-wee hockey team because he's no longer considered good enough for his new 12-year-old age bracket. His coach tells him, At this point, if you can't be good at hockey, it's like, don't bother. Evan's mom is outraged, and she points out how overly extreme the sport has gotten, using examples like the fact that one parent felt it necessary to bring a private trainer and a sports psychologist to her 12-year-old kid's peewee hockey practice. As Evan's mom puts it, can't kids just play hockey for fun? She sets out on a quest to start a new hockey team that welcomes all the kids who aren't considered good enough, the social outcasts, the people falling through the cracks of society, the ones who would probably never make it on a typical competitive hockey team, but who could really benefit from the positive impacts of participating in a hockey team that has no tryouts, no cuts, no pressure, just inclusion, affirmation, teamwork, and plenty of opportunities for healthy personal development. In the movie The Greatest Showman, the character of P.T. Barnum ends up pouring his whole life into the hamster wheel, trying desperately to prove himself to the world, to fill the hole, the wound, the trauma inside of him through the mad pursuit of achievement and social approval. He becomes so consumed by it that he loses sight of the basic things in his life that are more important. He sings a beautiful song about it at the end of the movie called From Now On. There's also an incredible scene in which Barnum observes an opera singer who has also gotten consumed by the hamster wheel. But instead of hearing the opera song she sings, we get to hear what Barnum recognizes all too well, which is the inner crying out of her heart, calling out that no amount of achievement will ever be enough. In the movie Chariots of Fire, we see the contrasting stories of Harold Abrams and Eric Liddell, one absolutely consumed with the pursuit of proving himself to the world through achievement, the other not feeling any need to prove himself at all, running solely because of the joy he feels as he uses his God-given gift of running. As he puts it, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. Whereas Harold describes his intentions through a painful monologue about how he has become so consumed by his quest for winning that he doesn't know what he'll do with himself if he ever achieves it. And he's now terrified of winning almost as much as he is terrified of losing. The movie Hook shows Peter Pan having left Neverland and grown up and gotten married. When the movie starts, adult Peter has gotten himself stuck on the hamster wheel, so consumed with his business life that he completely neglects his family. Over the course of the movie, he has to break free from the hamster wheel and rediscover his foundations, his joy, the freedom that comes with the ability to be his truest self and to play and look ridiculous and risk falling without fear of what other people will think of him. In the movie Encanto, we see a whole family that is incredibly gifted, but totally trapped on the hamster wheel. And the pressure is destroying them and their family, literally ripping cracks in their foundations. Louisa has a whole song called Surface Pressure about the pressure she's under and how it's too much for her, even though she's incredibly strong. Mirabelle has to help her family learn to break free and discover the joy of just being themselves instead of desperately striving to meet the expectations of others. There's a beautiful moment in which Isabella has a breakthrough moment where she realizes that she can step off the hamster wheel and stop trying to be perfect and just be herself. And she realizes how special and beautiful and powerful her true, imperfect self really is. She pours out her newfound joy and freedom in a song called What Else Can I Do? The movie To Save a Life is a much more serious examination of the hamster wheel for high school and college students and young adults, including the tragic consequences that can come from it, and a look at how churches can incidentally end up contributing to the hamster wheel culture, despite their good intentions. Courageous is a roller coaster ride through the hamster wheel for fathers and parents in general, and the dangers and pitfalls that can come from hamster wheel parenting. Sister Act is a fun ride through breaking the hamster wheel in a religious setting, using the extreme comedic example of a Vegas showgirl disguised as a nun as she hides from the mob. She and the nuns help each other to grow in different ways, and together they save their church from the slow death it was dying as it was stuck on its own hamster wheel, rigidly clinging to their routine, despite the way it was crushing all life in it. There are so many great examples of the hamster wheel. Once you understand it, you'll see it all over the place. Sometimes it's portrayed in an inspiring way, as a character or real life person pours their whole life into one obsessive goal and ultimately achieves it. There will always be a percentage of people who find their way into the top percentile in something they love. And for them, the hamster wheel may not seem so bad, especially if they have a really healthy support system around them. But for countless others, the experience becomes the giant flaming hamster wheel of death, creating more brokenness than it benefits, especially for those that don't have strong, healthy foundations. The saddest thing about the hamster wheel is the insidious, pervasive lies it creates. The hamster wheel tells us that the only way we can gain respect and love and joy and peace is by being the most talented, the best looking, the most physically gifted, the smartest, the most connected, the most wealthy, the most famous. But the reality is, 99% of us will never live up to those standards. 99% of us will never win America's Got Talent or any other manufactured television drama. Most of us would never get on the show in the first place. Or if we did, we'd end up like Lindsey Sterling, getting absolutely shredded by the vicious comments of the judges. 99% of us will never play in the NFL or win a Super Bowl. 99% of us will never perform on Broadway. Most of us won't even get to play a lead role in a youth theater or community theater show. 99% of us will never appear in a Hollywood movie or TV show, and certainly not in a lead role. And we certainly will never win any kind of an award for doing so. 99% of us won't get into the so-called top colleges or earn a six-figure salary or start the next Apple or Facebook. 99% of us won't have 1 million followers on social media or write a best-selling book or make a major medical discovery. But the hamster wheel says we have to do that. It tells us that we have to be in the top percentile to be happy and successful and valued. But this is a lie. We can live just fine without the hamster wheel. We can still live happy lives full of joy and peace and freedom and community. We are beautiful and special and powerful just by being ourselves. We don't need to be better than anybody else, and we don't need to measure up to some insanely high standard to have value. More than that, people who do achieve the very pinnacle of their hamster wheels are often no happier than the rest of us. In fact, many people caught up on the hamster wheel for so long end up more broken and lost than anybody else. The paparazzi thrive on airing this brokenness to the world, like parasites feeding on death and destruction. If you look at the world of high-level youth sports, the way some young prospective Olympic athletes are treated is the epitome of this problem. There are many horrific stories of abuse suffered by young gymnasts right here in the United States at some of the top gymnastics programs in the country. Many coaches and programs have become so obsessed with winning at all costs that they have used verbal and physical abuse and intimidation to try and get the best performances out of their athletes, even if it damages their bodies and their mental health long term. Many of those stories are too disturbing to share here, but you can look them up. We may be tempted to think these extremes are the exception, but personally, the more I learn, the more I find it to be the symptom of a much larger and more pervasive problem that permeates almost our entire culture of youth activities and youth development, and our larger culture as a whole in business, sports, education, entertainment, and almost every facet of life here in America. This is fueled more and more by social media and the entertainment industry, which create unrealistic standards of beauty, power, achievement, success, and value. The hamster wheel has become so ingrained into our culture that we've almost become numb to it, almost unable to see it, even though it's staring us right in the face. It's actually become more and more common for major companies to incorporate mental health care, mindfulness, and some sort of spirituality or other deeper purpose to their practices to try and mitigate the damage created by their harmful practices, making work more and more in a person's entire life, rather than creating a healthy work-life balance. This practice of band-aid fixes has trickled down to youth development culture and practices, which tends to emulate what is done professionally and to try and prepare young people for that lifestyle by integrating it at a young age, rather than breaking the cycle with healthier practices that create healthier, more sustainable foundations for future growth. Here in the Bay Area, when the pressure becomes too much and a young person takes their life, it is common for people to initially react with shock, unable to understand why. But then more and more people start to speak up about the insane pressure young people face here, and it begins to make more sense to people. But the hamster wheel culture still doesn't change. Some band aid fixes are implemented, like a temporary increase of mental health care, but people ultimately end up going right back to the same hamster wheel model that could lead to such tragic outcomes. A few years ago, one top Palo Alto high school had a particularly tragic period with 5 suicides and 42 other students hospitalized or otherwise treated for serious suicidal thoughts. This led to a CDC investigation and national headlines like, "Why are so many kids with bright prospects killing themselves in Palo Alto?" This tragic series of events shook the perception that the hamster wheel pursuit is the way to achieve happiness. Resulting studies and experts showed data that indicated that rich, privileged, seemingly successful kids actually had higher rates of depression, anxiety, drug and alcohol addiction, and other such challenges than other kids. They even had higher rates of those things than kids who grew up in some of the most extreme poverty and the most struggling communities in our country. More and more, the evidence showed that people who were at the pinnacle of hamster wheel achievement, people with wealth and privilege, people who went to top schools and played for top sports teams or participated in top arts programs, were just as broken, if not more so, than anybody else. Even worse, studies showed that these struggling students strongly identified their value with their achievement and that they felt like a failure if they achieved less than others. In the case of that Palo Alto school, when administrators tried to remove the first period of the day so that kids could get more sleep, the overwhelming majority of students protested the decision, with the number one general reason cited being that they felt like they would fall behind, and that they would have less time in the afternoon and evening for the insane amount of homework and extracurricular activities they had. Despite all of the data, this pervasive problem persists to this day. More attention has been given to mental health support for young people, but not enough attention has been given as to why that support is needed in the first place. Why is suicide one of the leading causes of death for young people? Why do young people have such insanely high rates of depression, anxiety, addiction, suicidal thoughts, self harm, eating disorders, image issues, and other signs of brokenness, despite outward signs of success like high level achievement in academics, the arts, sports, or other pursuits? The answer is the hamster wheel culture and all of the systems and methods that contribute to it, including in youth activities, schools, colleges, businesses, athletics programs, and even in churches and other religious communities. Sadly, I've seen this too much in real life in my time in the youth development field and in the world of the performing arts especially. In its purest form, the arts should be the opposite of the hamster wheel. Art is about expressing your truest self rather than comparing yourself to others. It's freedom at its finest. It's an activity that just about anybody can participate in and create their own form of beauty. It also connects people together in a special way, breaking down the walls that divide and confine people. But the performing arts industry has largely lost sight of what art is all about, and it's been taken over by the hamster wheel. Now you see performing arts programs that are focused predominantly on a quest for perfection over healthy personal development and authentic expression. Now you see programs that seem to care more about impressing ticket buyers and sponsors than they do about what's best for the healthy development of their participants. Now you see youth theater and community theater programs largely copying what's done professionally in the highly competitive for-profit hamster wheel world that is Broadway in New York City. They perform the same shows, use the same types of facilities, and mimic the same general practices, although usually without the competitive Broadway pay and union rules that protect the health and basic rights of artists. They do this even though what works for a professional for-profit theater company may not be what's best for a nonprofit community arts organization, and especially so for youth development programs. It's like they don't even recognize that they're creating their own hamster wheel culture and creating or contributing to the hamster wheels of individual people. For example, the traditional audition experience is a highly competitive and inherently judgmental experience that can contribute to perfectionism, division, self-consciousness and image issues, along with jealousy, bitterness, gossip, and other negative mindsets. The shows used by the vast majority of theater programs were written for commercial Broadway programs to be performed by the best performers in the world who fit the narrow set of attributes prized by professional producers. There isn't a lot of flexibility in the way these shows are written, which limits the extent to which amateur and youth theater programs can adapt them to fit their performers or to give more opportunities to underrepresented groups of people. Traditional casting methods reflect this reality, with casting biased towards that rare set of performers prized by Broadway producers. This can be destructive in and of itself, causing hierarchies, perfectionism, body shaming, and so much more. But it can also be blatantly discriminatory, with people being given or denied opportunities based on their race, gender, physical appearance, their weight, their height, their disabilities, their age, and countless other factors. Actors learn to be deeply self-aware of their strengths and weaknesses. And the more they go through the audition process with little or no success, the more they naturally begin to wonder and ruthlessly self-examine to see what is wrong with them, what makes them less than others, rather than growing up affirmed in the beauty and power of what makes them special and unique. Some teachers and directors may even tell people bluntly that they're too fat or that they're not the right type for lead roles. It's horrible. To make matters worse, the traditional rehearsal experience is not designed to develop performers. It's a system that is designed to churn out quality shows with minimal time, effort, or variation. This is effective for its purpose, and it works well for professional companies that need to churn out shows quickly and to have those shows remain exactly the same night after night, even as different performers rotate in and out of the roles. But in my personal opinion, this system is a terrible fit for youth programs. In a youth theater setting, this system too often stifles creativity, crushes authenticity, and absolutely squeezes the very life out of a culture. It's often kind of a dictatorship, an experience that so often looks like a director telling or even yelling at everybody what to do. And people are simply expected to sit down, be quiet, to do as they're told. Every single movement and gesture and inflection is pre-planned by the director, and the cast is simply expected to follow those directions with little to no variation. Ballet in particular tends to be hyper-focused on perfection and doing exactly as you're told with no deviation whatsoever. Ballet kids grow up knowing if they have bad feet, bad turnout, bad hands, if they're considered overweight, if their movements are too noisy, if they lack the desired amount of grace and artistry. Many of them inherently learn to be self-critical. This system also tends to directly copy the decisions made by the directors of Broadway productions. In youth theater especially, directors often more or less copy how each show is done on Broadway. This process of show replication can still be a lot of fun, but it doesn't do an adequate job of healthy personal or professional development, and it can create an unhealthy culture that creates or contributes to hamster wheels. There are a number of specific problems with this system. First of all, when you replicate what was done professionally, it impacts your casting decisions. If you want to be like Broadway, you have to cast like Broadway. And that takes us back to that casting process that is biased towards the top percentile of performers, who are considered the most talented, the best looking, the most physically fit, the able-bodied, the people who the directors think are the right race or gender or age or voice type for the roles. This creates a hamster wheel culture of perfectionism and judgment and even outright discrimination. It also creates a hierarchy where a small percentage of people are inherently deemed better than everybody else. And these people get the overwhelming majority of the spotlight, development time, personalized training, affirmation, awards, press coverage. The second problem is that in order to make this business model work, you have to fit as many students into your show as possible, even if most of them don't get to do much of anything. The only way to give yourself the best chance of getting the rare students who can fit that Broadway standard of perfection for the lead roles is to get as many students as possible to audition for your shows. This has many benefits, including giving you a larger budget, a bigger look and sound and feel, and a higher overall quality of production. as well as simply giving an opportunity for more students to get a small taste of that theater experience, even if it's just a brief appearance as tree number 5 or random villager. But it also causes a hamster wheel culture where so many students are trying desperately to live up to that Broadway standard of perfection that you set as the goal. Chasing a goal like that can initially be exciting, but it comes with downsides, like the casting process I mentioned earlier and the rehearsal system where kids are expected to have the same level of self-discipline and self-control and perfection that was set by the top 5% of professional adult performers in the country. You also run into the inherent problem where you have, say, 100 kids who are in a show who are auditioning for, say, 10 lead roles, which means that 90% of those kids are going to have to be told that they're not good enough. I may be generalizing and being overdramatic in my descriptions, but these are simply the conclusions I and many others have come to after years of experience and analysis. In fact, I regularly find myself in conversations with random people who have strong backgrounds in the arts, who grew disillusioned by the toxic culture. And they say the same types of things I'm saying here. So many people go into the arts full of optimism and excitement, and so many come out the other side utterly disillusioned, often with lingering negative impacts, traumatized, their sense of self-worth utterly broken. That's not to say the arts are completely bad or that they can't be good. There are many people who have wonderful experiences in the arts. There are some programs and directors that manage to maintain a healthy culture, despite the inherent challenges presented by the system they use. All I'm saying is that the system is broken and inherently flawed. The same thing is true with many youth activities, along with schools, colleges, athletics programs, businesses, and even in religious communities. There's a lot of good and a lot of really good intentions, but also a lot that contributes to the hamster wheel. Manufactured perfectionism may look good in the short term, like Russian figure skaters who shine for one Olympics, and then their competitive career is basically over because the physical and mental pressure put on their bodies from such a young age finally catches up to them. You can control every aspect of a young person's performance and fine-tune it to the utmost degree of detail to fit some impossible standard of perfection and sustain it just long enough to get your trophy or award. And then when the house of cards comes tumbling down, you can just move on to the next group of young people and leave somebody else to clean up the mess you've created in a person's life. Personally, I won't be a part of that system anymore. I can't. I'm too aware of the consequences. I hear the painful stories people share with me. I see tragic news headlines. I see the disturbing studies that vividly illustrate the insanely high percentages of young people struggling with image issues, depression, anxiety, suicide, self-harm, eating disorders, and so much more. The hamster wheel is literally killing us, and young people in particular. It's isolating and dividing us, robbing us of our joy and our freedom. I'll acknowledge that I've been guilty of perpetuating this hamster wheel system. I've participated in it as a student and as a performer, and occasionally as a leader, along with many ways in my own personal life with my own personal hamster wheels. But I'm done with it. I've seen and experienced how things can be done differently. I've seen in so many ways, so many personal testimonies, how you could have a healthier process and honestly get even better results in terms of the development of your participants. So what's the solution? We're talking about mindsets and cultures and methodologies that have been established over decades and become rooted in almost every facet of our society. That's a pretty daunting task to try and turn that around. But what if we could change that? What if we could do away with the perfectionism and the pressure to outperform everybody else, no matter what? What if we could do away with those destructive levels of comparison, those impossible standards of beauty and power and respect and achievement and love? What if we could put youth development in a chrysalis, a safe, nurturing environment dedicated entirely to healthy development? What if we could create a place for young people to blossom and thrive, free from the hamster wheel? A place where they could be their truest, most authentic selves, a place where they could learn to see the good in themselves and others, instead of focusing on all the perceived flaws. I'd like to set the stage for you by sharing a short story about an experience I had volunteering at a summer camp, where we succeeded in breaking free of the hamster wheel and completely transforming the culture. Then I'm going to share a little bit of what we've been doing at Chrysalis Arts Ministries to flip the script in the world of the performing arts. In the first episode of this podcast, I shared how broken I was growing up in the hamster wheel society of the Silicon Valley, especially as a person with a debilitating chronic illness. For a number of years in my recovery process, I volunteered as a cabin leader for a summer camp for kids with celiac disease. When I first started there, the camp was still pretty new and didn't yet have a firm foundation. The culture was reflective of the world outside, with some people genuinely trying to do good, others just not caring too much about anything, and a number of people who were acting out. A bunch of the staff were clearly there just for their own selfish purposes, which pretty much boiled down to flirting with each other and spending all their time together rather than working to give their students a great experience. This example trickled down to the students, setting a tone for the teenage campers in particular. The culture was so broken and in some cases so toxic that several students went home the first day or soon thereafter. Some people seemed more interested in destroying things than in building people up and creating goodness. The first year or two, it was hard to get people to buy into the idea of creating a healthier culture at camp. Trying to get students and staff to participate in activities like the talent show or skit night was a very difficult experience. Most people were self-conscious and felt that they weren't special or talented. They felt like they didn't measure up to the standard of a talent show. I'm sure plenty of them were afraid of being judged. Looking back, it makes sense, since most of them grew up in a hamster wheel culture where only those in the top percentile are considered special enough to deserve a chance in the spotlight. And those who aren't in the top percentile are often mocked or ridiculed or otherwise made to feel embarrassed and ashamed. A handful of us on the staff were determined to make things better, and we were fortunate to have a fantastic camp director who was similarly committed. Over the course of a couple years, things started to change. In some cases, the process was helped by replacing certain staff members with better ones, or not allowing certain students to return, or simply lowering the age limit for students and raising it for staff. These kinds of healthy boundaries are really important for breaking toxic patterns. But the real key changes centered around the performing arts. A number of us staff members worked hard to identify the talents and passions and personalities of our students, and we helped them figure out how to use those in our talent show or skit night. Some of us set the example by getting up on the stage ourselves to perform, even though we generally weren't in that top percentile of fantastically talented people. Others aided the process by creating a healthy audience culture, enthusiastically cheering on everybody who got up on the stage, regardless of their talent level. A key turning point happened in the mornings when the camp director started playing dance music over the loudspeaker to wake everybody up, and some of the younger students and their leaders got out on their terrace and danced. The leadership at camp embraced this little movement of positive camp culture, and they started a new tradition of dancing in the dining hall at breakfast. Over time, more and more people in the camp would join in. After a couple of years, every single person at camp would get up on stage and dance together every morning at breakfast. It was all simple dancing that almost anybody could do, like the Macarena or the Cupid Shuffle, but we all had fun with it. It was a great community bonding experience. This created a new culture of inclusion where people felt comfortable getting up on stage together. The positive effects of this spilled over to the talent show, to the point where eventually almost every single person at camp would perform in the skits in the talent show each year. One particularly hot summer afternoon, when activities were canceled, the entire camp was hanging out in the dining hall, which was cooler, and a new tradition was sparked when the camp DJ played Disney music, and people started standing up on their chairs and singing along at the top of their lungs. Pretty soon, this became a yearly camp tradition, with the whole dining hall full of students and staff singing at the top of their lungs. I'm certain most of those people would never do that anywhere else, but camp was a safe place that allowed and encouraged people to do stuff like that. And the camp had already broken the ice with the culture of the camp dancing together in the mornings, so singing together was the natural next step in that process. There were still one or two activities that some people didn't feel comfortable participating in, but our staff got better and better at being there for those kids, creating alternate activities and community building for them so that nobody was left out and nobody fell through the cracks. There was also a really cool camp tradition that got started when the director had a jar in the dining hall where people could leave thank you notes, and he would read them aloud to the whole camp at breakfast. This tradition blossomed into a wonderful celebration of love, with people recognizing each other in amazing ways. Small acts of kindness and service that would typically go overlooked instead were honored and celebrated in front of the entire camp. People learned to look for the good in those around them rather than the bad. People were inspired to do more acts of kindness, and contagious love spread throughout the camp. Over time, the camp culture was completely transformed. The brokenness, the judgment, the apathy, the selfishness, the self consciousness more or less disappeared. Every single participant was included and valued. More and more people felt free to be themselves and to participate fully, and the whole camp became like one big family. The hamster wheel culture of the outside world no longer existed at this camp. It was utterly extinguished by love, joy, grace, inclusion, affirmation, equal opportunities for all, and a total lack of destructive standards of judgment and comparison. It wasn't perfect, but it was a dramatic improvement over so many typical youth activities. It showed what was possible with an alternative to the hamster wheel. Volunteering at this camp every summer for many years really inspired me as I worked on building Chrysalis Arts Ministries. I saw how a team of dedicated volunteers could create an incredible experience and a culture that was so much the opposite of what young people experience at so many other programs and activities. I felt like God was giving me a firsthand look at the kind of impact He wanted us to have full time at Chrysalis. We actually saw similar results right from the beginning of our youth theater program. With our very first class, we succeeded at building a culture very similar to that summer camp. Our first group of students almost immediately became like family to each other. There were no grades or scores, no lead roles, no winners or losers, no judges, no hierarchy based on experience or talent or charisma, just love and joy, inclusion and affirmation. There were two students in that class who initially were so lacking in confidence that you couldn't hear them sing, even in a quiet room with them singing into a microphone. But by the end of our first couple months, they had gained so much confidence and felt so comfortable at Chrysalis that they came to us and asked if they could sing a duet together in our recital, just the two of them on a big stage together in front of an audience. That was such a cool moment. But that was exactly the kind of impact we had wanted to have for young people. Those two students probably wouldn't have been given that opportunity at your average, highly competitive youth theater program. And they certainly would not have gotten the kind of healthy personal development experience that would have made that moment possible. But our program succeeded in giving them that gift. This was the first of many signs that showed our methods worked, that by prioritizing the healthy development of our students above all else, we could actually help them blossom and thrive more than they would otherwise. This continued to prove itself true over and over as our program continued over the next 5 years. We even had students come to Chrysalis after being overlooked and underdeveloped elsewhere. And after growing and blossoming with us for a while, they moved on to other opportunities and found doors open to them that were previously closed. Over time, it became clear what made our program work and what made it fall apart. When we focused on creating Chrysalis experiences that prioritized healthy personal development above all else, using small group learning, personalized development experiences, and an emphasis on joy and freedom and authenticity over robotic obedience and the pursuit of manufactured perfection, we generally saw incredible success. But when we tried too much to emulate the hamster wheel experience offered by so many other theater groups, we found that it was almost always destructive to our core purpose, to the healthy and effective development of our participants. The one production where we achieved the highest Broadway style production quality was also the show that ended up being the most unhealthy and destructive behind the scenes. But when we stuck to our core values, we were able to produce shows that were still extremely entertaining, but much healthier and more effective at planting seeds for long-term sustainable growth, giving opportunities and personalized development to students who would probably have been overlooked and underdeveloped at most youth theater programs. Personally, I found that going smaller with our productions did affect our overall production quality somewhat, but it actually improved the quality of the performances from our students, as well as dramatically improving the experience for everybody involved, including the parents and staff. Over time, the more we experimented with the traditional theater model, the more we realized that it wasn't possible to create a sustainable experience built on a hamster wheel foundation without it becoming itself a hamster wheel. This meant that we had to totally rethink the whole concept of youth performing arts activities. We had to evaluate which pieces contributed to the destructive hamster wheel and what alternative things we could do to help people become free from it. We're honestly still continuing that evaluation and creative development process. Like a certain magical theme park, our program will never be complete, but we have seen dramatic results already. And I'm confident that we will continue to see more and more breakthroughs as we continue to adapt and grow. We will continue working to evaluate and reevaluate our program to better fulfill our core purpose of healthy foundational development for young people, free from hamster wheels. I really believe that what we're working on at Chrysalis Arts Ministries is at the forefront of a much larger movement of healthy youth development that has already saved lives and which has the power to transform lives, families, communities, cultures, and entire industries. In the coming episodes, I will get into more specifics about how we can break toxic patterns and build healthier ones. But for now, I want you to have some time to sit and process this whole concept I've just introduced. So for our first step challenge today, I want you to think about the concept of the hamster wheel and how it may be showing up in your life or in the lives of those around you. Think about the seemingly innocent and inconsequential things that end up planting seeds that sooner or later become hamster wheels or contribute to hamster wheels. Think about what you can do to break free from the hamster wheel. Think about stories and testimonies that illustrate the concept of breaking free from the hamster wheel and how that can help guide you in your life. Think about the simple first steps you can take to shift away from perfectionism and the all-consuming pursuit of achievement and valuing yourself based on these kinds of things, and how you can instead start building your foundations on freedom and joy and grace and authenticity. For today's word of affirmation, I want you to know that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to run on the hamster wheel or try to achieve that perfect standard that is consuming your whole life. I know it may seem like that's the only way to find peace and fulfillment, but this is a lie. You would be shocked at how easy it is to find what you're truly looking for if you're brave enough to step off the wheel and look around a bit. You may find that all you ever needed, all the most wonderful things in the world, can be found without any striving at all. We'll talk more about that in our next episode, which is all about finding your voice, breaking free from toxic patterns and mindsets to become your truest, freest, fullest, authentic self. Have a wonderful day, and I'll look forward to talking with you again soon on the next episode of Foundations. Thank you for listening to Foundations. I would love to hear your foundation stories and the impact that the stories shared here are having in your life. You can submit voice memos to our Anchor podcast page, or you can email your stories to foundations@chrysalisartsministries.org. Check the description box on our podcast page for direct links. Have a wonderful day, and I'll look forward to speaking with you again on the next episode of Foundations.